deer proudly shows his little 2-point rack of antlers covered with velvet. He'll scrape this velvet off on bushes and polish these antlers, and that'll start happening pretty soon. So by rutting season, those antlers will be all polished and hard. He's a very small buck, probably only 1 or 2 years old, and he's taking him a little nap. He jumps up from his nap, stretches a little bit, and decides to walk away. He's got a little bit of an itch that has to be dealt with, though, before he can move on. After a long winter, there's plenty of welcome feed here for him to fatten up on before another winter is upon him, and then he'll have to move down to lower elevation. The road winds its way up on Steens Peak. It is about 9,700 feet above sea level. We reach the summit, unload our packs, and we're ready to start out. But first we'll look over the east slope of the Steens. Below us, through all the California smoke, we can see the Alvert Desert and Mickey Basin, and even by looking out about
20 miles,
we could sort of see Coyote Lake out there. Everyone has retrieved their backpacks from the back of our vehicle, and we're putting them on, as well as our fishing poles, and getting ready to start down the mountain slope to Wild Horse Lake. There's a small routed out sign ahead of us that says Steens Mountain Wilderness Area and Trail ahead of us. Even up on the summit, there's some very fine dwarfed wildflowers growing along the trail on both sides. We see lots and lots of the buckwheat family, even a few phlox, as we come to the area where we start climbing down to Wild Horse Lake, which is straight ahead of us. There are many glaciers still hanging below the cliffs above Wild Horse Lake, and each glacier has a little stream running from it, from the melting snows of the glacier, which feed Wild Horse Lake and keep it fresh and cold for the special Lahontan cutthroat. As we climb down the cliffs and get ready to go down there and test the water and see if we can catch one of these very, very special trout. It's a totally fantastic day for our hike today, even though there's some smoke in the sky from the California forest fires. Still, that's bothering us very little at this altitude. It seems like it's hanging down below us more than up here as we climb down the cliffs and get ready to catch some of those Lahontan cutthroat trout past a little glacier that is melting and making the trail a little bit muddy. It's the last week in July, but still we're at a high elevation here, so it's early spring up here as the snow isn't gone yet, and the wildflowers are just starting their blooming cycle. The Steens Mountain thistle is just barely starting their blossoming cycle up here. The Steens Mountain thistle is a very special thistle. They're only found in this area. They're unique only to the Steens Mountains. The boys are ahead of us now, as Marge and I are pausing along the trail on the way down to take pictures. We've been coming here about the same time each year, and some of the flowers are just starting to bloom that were in full blossom other years. The deadly larkspur poses with its beautiful bloom at trail's edge, as well as the penstemons. We're getting closer to Wild Horse Lake now as we climb down 1 foot in front of another, and we get down to the lake and see the boys are there already tying on fish hooks, and it looks like Dustin is the first one to catch one of these very special Lahontan cutthroat. The Lahontan cutthroat are indigenous to southeast Oregon and northern Nevada. They've adapted to where they can withstand the super high salt content and alkali content of these shallow, muddy lakes out in the desert, and also they've adapted to where they can withstand the super heat of these lakes. So they're a very special trout. Although this lake, probably most any kind of trout could live here, and this lake isn't planted with trout. They introduced the trout in here a number of years ago, and they reproduce in the lake the natural way. A bee climbs around on a death camas blossom, and the lake looks calm and clear as a little stream rushes down from the glacier above. I walk around to the far side of the lake to see if I can catch a fish, and I look across. I see something is wrong over across. I saw Joe's brand new tent, which he hasn't even had a chance to try out, is caught in a little dust devil whirlwind. It puffs it up and takes it about 20 feet in the air and flies it out and sets it down right in the edge of the lake. Dustin tries to get it but can't reach it. It's out in too deep a water, and the water is kind of warm around the edge, but it's ice cold out in the center of the lake. I see this little dust devil turned our tent upside down as well, but at least it didn't end up in the lake as Joe's brand new tent did. Marge takes to the water and swims out for the sinking tent here, as Joe comes running from up above to see about his brand new tent, and it's almost to sink in the deep ice cold waters of Wild Horse. Marge swims out there and gets a hold of it by now and tries to drag it in, but the tent is sinking rapidly and the weight of the water is holding it down to where she can just barely move it. She works on it till she's totally exhausted. Then, this is the first time we've ever seen other people down at the lake. There's another guy there that has a float tube. He lets them use it. They go out in the water with the float tube, hook on the tent, and pull it up next to shore, since it's impossible to pull it in by swimming. By now, the air is mostly out of the tent, and it's pretty well submerged, It's completely under now as Marge swims to shore without Joe's brand spanking new tent that he's never tried out. Dustin's standing out there as far as he can stand and trying to give a hand. They brought some fishing poles to try to snag it, but that's not going to work either. These mountain lakes are extremely dangerous to swim out because they're drop-offs. Up on the drop-off, the water's kind of nice and warm on the shelf, and you get out there a bit, and it's ice cold and deeper than fury. They finally get the tent up next to shore, and Dustin pulls it up, tries to get the water out of it where they can set it up to dry it out, because nightfall will be here before they know it, and they need a good dry tent to sleep in tonight. Marge was totally exhausted after fighting with trying to get that tent in while swimming. She rests a little bit and warms up from the ice-cold waters, and she bounces back in a hurry. The boys take the tent over and set it up again, only this time they're going to be careful to weight it down to where it won't be floating away. Marge has bounced back by now, and it's time for her to see if she can catch one of these elusive cutthroat trout, and it looks as if she has one on right now, and here he comes. One after another, she catches her fish till she's the first one with her 5-fish limit out of Wild Horse Lake, the real pretty, nice Lahontan cutthroat trout. In this super clear water, these fish are really spooky, so you have to use a quite light leader and fish it about right. But if you fish it right, you're going to catch plenty of fish, and it looks like we were doing it right because we caught all the fish we wanted. And so we're going to have us another really good fish fry, only this time it'll be with these special Lahontan cutthroat trout. Looks like even I caught a nice one here. Before the sun ever dips down below the horizon, we have all the fish we want, and so we'll spend the rest of the day just exploring the alpine meadows, and some of the Indian paintbrush are blooming real nicely around the edge of the lake. And as soon as the sun sets, we'll be in our tents and asleep, and the boys' tent has already dried out. There's a few of the little dwarf monkey flowers growing right alongside some of the streams, but they really haven't started blooming much around this area because it's been too cold and it's too early in the year up here for them. One fish after another is given up by Wild Horse Lake as we walk around the edge of it. At first, Joe didn't seem to be able to catch any, but pretty soon he caught on and caught his fish in a little while there. He's really proud of the first one he caught. And then another. Once Joe caught on, it didn't take him long at all to catch all the fish he wanted out of the waters of Wild Horse Lake. We never have caught a fish here under 12 inches long and not much over 16 inches, but there should be fish of all size out there because they reproduce right in this lake, but maybe the smaller ones are way out in deeper water where we're not catching them. Since it's a very short season up here for them to grow and feast on insects and other aquatic bugs, maybe they just don't grow much larger than 16 inches. It should have plenty of oxygen in it with all these little streams running down to support a fish growing quite larger. But if they're larger, we've never seen nor caught one. The lake is already in the evening shadows, and the little pinnacles on the other side are still illuminated by the sun. The boys' tent is nice and dry, and it looks to me like they've gone to bed kinda early tonight. I guess they had a big day today, hiking down and trying to fish their tent out of the lake. The next morning, we're up early, and it's time to start packing. We're going to head up out of this canyon before the sun starts beating down and making it hot for the trip out. And the trip out is all uphill. There's quite a bit of smoke in the air. When I first got out of the tent this morning, I could smell the smoke from the California forest fires. There's blankets of wildflowers growing all around Wild Horse Lake. We gather up all of our fishing gear, and we're about ready to start climbing out of the canyon by now. The bright sun is already shining on the mountainside across, and so we've got to get going, or it's going to be getting hot. We heard that down on the desert the temperature was over 100 degrees, but up here it's always at least 20 degrees colder, so in the heat of the day it might get up to 80, but still that's a bit warm for backpacking. Some little orchids are growing alongside the little stream which is carrying the glacier waters down to Wild Horse Lake, roaring and crashing. The rooster head or shooting star flowers are starting to bloom alongside the stream as we get organized and we're ready to start climbing out of Wild Horse Canyon by now. We pause for a moment to watch to see a row of flowers growing alongside a little glacial stream that they're watered and blooming their heads off. The trail out is all uphill, but it's very interesting with its fields of wildflowers all along, so it doesn't seem like it's nearly as far as it actually is. Matter of fact, you sort of hate to get to the end of it just because of all the wildflowers growing along it. Marge doesn't even look like she's worked up a sweat yet as she poses behind a large lupin. We look back at Wild Horse Lake, and the sun is almost to touch it. And a little while next time we stop to look back, the sun has already washed away the nighttime shadows from Wild Horse Lake as it is warming the shallow shelves of Wild Horse Lake. The small glaciers on all sides of us are gradually melting, giving plenty of moisture to the wildflowers and keeping Wild Horse Lake fresh and full of oxygen. As we put one foot in front of the other, and we've reached the cliffs now, where we'll soon be on top of the world, and Wild Horse Lake is completely in the sunshine. More wildflowers of all descriptions are blooming as we reach near the top, right under some glaciers. It's a flower garden second to none, like you've never seen, and it doesn't even need fertilizer or weeding. Some of the monkey flowers in the areas where there's more water and the ground is a little richer grow bigger than the dwarfed ones where the ground is poorer. But in spite of that, they grow wherever they can, and if there's not enough moisture and fertilizer in the ground, they're just dwarfs. Some of them grow in a little circular crown. As we almost reach the summit of the Steens Mountains here at 9,700 feet above sea level. Across the canyon, we can see the boys moving on up farther ahead of us. They're not stopping to take pictures like us. The larkspur are growing quite well here as well. We look ahead to keep an eye on those boys, and we see them right under the final glacier of the summit of the Steens. They're adjusting their packs and moving on up till they're right on the summit, and we'll be right behind them. Right under the summit, there are probably more wildflowers than most places, because this is where the snow piles high in the winter and furnishes a lot of very valuable, necessary water for the wildflowers to grow good. The fires from California are pouring smoke up into all these valleys where you can't even see to the bottom on the other down below us. And a few bees are still sleeping in the Steens Mountain thistles. As soon as the sun hits them and warms them up, they'll be frantically on their way to do their job of pollinizing the wildflowers of the Steens Mountains. I glanced down on a meadow below us, a little glacial meadow here, fed from little streams every which direction going through it, and there is a mule deer out grazing around on the fresh new grasses and little weeds and plants of this little alpine meadow right below the glaciers. Marge and I have reached the summit glaciers here now, and it's just a matter of going up on the ridge and following a little trail up, and we'll be to the car. The sun is hitting here, and the bees are already starting their job. We reach the car on the summit and see the smoke is hanging just below us, so we'll not be able to get a very good view of things below us. There's some little seed pods growing right alongside where we're parked. As we move down lower, there's an alpine meadow that looks as if it's just been painted by wildflowers, and as an extra bonus, there's a little group of antelope grazing around out in this alpine meadow. The weather is entirely too violent and severe for any of the animals to winter up on top of the alpine meadows on the Steens Mountains, so they migrate down to the lower ground at the base of the mountain and even farther, and then when spring comes, they follow the grass as it starts growing green up to the summit of the Steens in July, the last of July and August and into September. When we reach the campground, we hook immediately onto the trail and chart a course for the Alvert Desert, where we're going to try this land sailor out. Since we brought it all the way up here, we better go down and give it a try. I pulled a little camping sticker off the post and we're on the way to the Alvert Desert. It'll be at least 20 degrees hotter down there, and it's like 80 up here, so it's probably going to be 100 degrees down there. But maybe we'll have some wind.
Well, did everybody have a good fishing trip?
No.
Yep.
How'd you like the hike?
It was okay.
It was long.
Okay, where are we off to now?
Over desert.
As we get to lower elevations, we see the thistles are blooming much lower on the stalk. The top of it's already finished. The Steens Mountain daisies are nearly finished blooming down at this elevation too. A few cattle are standing alongside the road as we go through the Catlow Valley along the Roaring Springs Ranch.